Now we're live. My microphone skills. After 3 years of working from home, my microphone skills are still absolute crap. It doesn't matter. Oh, hello. Nice to see you. Um, it doesn't matter how much time I've spent on meetings in work calls. I'm still the person that's speaking and they're on mute. Welcome, 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 welcome. It's going to be a very interesting stream. This. We are doing a fundraising stream today across Twitch and YouTube. Just so as you know, I've got Twitch and YouTube chat both open on the left hand side. So if I'm replying to someone and you can't see them, they're on the other stream. So I think the mainstream should be YouTube because I think that's where most of us are. But if you're on Twitch, hello. If you're on YouTube, hello. So yeah, today we're going to be doing a fundraising stream. We are going to be raising money for humanitarian purposes in Ukraine. Let me just show you what that looks like. I'll do that. We have a stream set up, a fundraising page set up, which is the Aspect History Ukrainian Fundraiser, and we're raising money today for the British Ukrainian Aid, which is a company that a non-profit that basically works with Ukraine from the British point of view to provide humanitarian aid. So if I go on to learn more for this, yep, all your charities, all your money is going to the charity. I think GoFundMe takes a little bit off the top, but so far we've raised £30, and I'm looking to try and raise about 500 today. So we'll see what happens. I'm just going to shove this into the chat. Hopefully this is going to work. I haven't tested this. We'll soon find out. Nightbot. Is Nightbot working on both of them? That's interesting. Might have to use a different bot on YouTube. Never mind, I'll just copy and paste that. So we have got a GoFundMe set up to raise money. So whatever you can donate, that's good. And again, it's all for humanitarian purposes. So, what are we going to do on this stream? I think you probably know by now that we do mythology and history stuff. So you can expect some of that. And today we're going to specifically be doing that for Ukraine. So Ukraine and mythology and history, and you know, the arts as well. And in the process, try to raise those funds. And the company that you're donated to are basically trying to make sense of all the madness that's going on and try and help actual people that aren't fighting, but they're just kind of in the middle of the mess. So for this stream, I'm going to try and keep things as lighthearted as humanly possible. That's going to be really, really difficult considering the context of what's going on at the minute. But obviously we can't talk about why we're streaming without actually talking about what's happening. So, you know, it's going to be impossible to be lighthearted about that darker subject, which is why we're probably going to get that out of the way first, so that, you know, you can feel sad at the beginning and then you can feel better later on. And we're going to start dark, get more fun as we go on. Just to get this out of the way as well, this is a pretty nerve-wracking stream for me, to be honest. There was a point yesterday, where I was reconsidering actually doing it. I've had quite a few people have come up to me and they've said that I'm a certain type of person. First of all, I'm a Nazi sympathizer, apparently, for trying to support Ukraine. I was called about 3 hours ago. I was called a pedo simp who who's trying to raise money for his propaganda masters. That was fun. So I'm, you know, if this gets rough today, and we start getting some real comments in, don't be surprised if I suddenly just halt the stream and turn it off, because I'm not into that. We're only here to raise money to help people. We're not here to, you know, fight the war online. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. So yeah, it's a 2 or 3 hour stream. I've not tested it. We'll see what happens. We've got quite a lot of content to go through. Quite a lot of custom content actually. We've gone away and we've done some editing. If it gets too rough with misinformation, as I said in the chat, fully expect me to turn the stream off because I'm not dealing with that. So, first we need to understand what is going on in Ukraine right now. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the Ukraine-Russia war that's going on, and we're going to use that to sort of explain what the purpose of the stream is, to sort of understand how important it is to support people in Ukraine. Essentially, why are we doing this? You know, if you've been living under a rock, you know why, but why are we doing this? So for that, we're going to be leaning on another YouTuber who is much better at explaining the overall context than I am. I'm going to be jumping onto one of his videos in and out. But the context is that Ukraine and Russia are at war. And the history of that conflict didn't start in 2022. It started way back in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea. And, you know, internationally speaking, it was considered an illegal action. Historically, they didn't do that the first time. I mean, I've got a newspaper over there from World War II that's talking about Russia annexing Crimea. But this came off the back of a huge revolution in Ukraine. A lot of very complicated stuff happened. The guy that I'm going to lean into to explain what has happened in the past is a guy called Adam something, and he's pretty good at what he does. He has very good justifications for the way that he explains things, and usually is very unbiased. He also does a running update of everything that's going on in Ukraine at the minute. So if you get a chance, I fully recommend to watch his full video there. I'm just going to reopen it because I completely lost it. But I'm going to put the link in the chat to his actual video. So if you get a chance at the end of the stream, you can have a look and see what you think. So the video is called Ukraine, the country that defied Vladimir Putin. Just shove that in the chat. Let me switch over to my screen, if I can remember how to do that. Ooh. And I've got some key points that I've laid out here, so don't expect me to watch the whole thing. I'm watching maybe a third of it. Let me, where am I? Screen, there we go. So, again, I've taken some brief sections. I'll fill in the gaps between the jumps, so you'll understand what's going on. And what I'll do as well is I'll even put my face down at the bottom just to make sure that it doesn't look like I'm trying to steal his content here. Have I got my little... No, that one. Oh, no. No. There you go. Now I'm at the bottom. Okay, so 24. Cast your mind back about 10 years, and we're going to be going from there. Let me pop my cans on.
Opening fire. The answer can be found in Ukraine's recent political history. In 2004, Viktor Yanukovych won the presidential election against his pro-European opponent, Viktor Yushchenko. The election was considered massively fraudulent both domestically and internationally, having been rife with voter intimidation, voter suppression, and massive corruption. This resulted in the so-called Orange Revolution, a peaceful protest movement that was successful in the end, having achieved an election rerun. There, Yushchenko beat Yanukovych by an 8% margin and became president of Ukraine. In the next election, however, in 2010, Yanukovych made a comeback by a thin margin, after which he imprisoned his main pro-Western opponent, Yulia Tymoshenko. The trial was of course a complete farce. Tymoshenko was a political prisoner. But the election once again exposed the massive divide inside Ukraine between pro-Western and pro-Russian regions. The pro-Western heartland being the areas around Lviv, while the pro-Russian the areas around Donetsk. The reason for the Party of Regions' popularity was in large part them favoring devolution of power to the regions and more autonomy for minorities, linguistic or ethnic. Now the areas in the south and east are mostly Russian-speaking and are closer to Russia culturally. There is of course nothing wrong with wanting to give minorities more autonomy. The problems start when the Russian government uses these minorities first as a Trojan horse and then a battering ram in service of their geopolitical interests. And make no mistake, Russia was not going to let Ukraine move towards the west. They were to remain firmly in Russian orbit, and Yanukovych was the guarantee for that. But alas, there was a small problem. Most people supported European integration over moving towards Russia. In the minds of many Ukrainians, Russia represented oppression, poverty, corruption, and the occasional genocide. And thus, during the protests, statues of Lenin became targets as the perceived symbols of the Russian world.
Okay, so following this, Yanukovych sought to quell the protests. First using political scaremongering, and then finally he hired thugs to intimidate people, intimidate the dissenters against him. The rougher Yanukovych got, the more the Ukrainians were brought together. Essentially, he galvanized them by treating them like crap. 434.
19th of February 2014, as the events dragged on for the third month, the protests briefly ran out of steam. People were exhausted and supplies were depleted. Of course, the government was aware of this, and so on the same day they were about to launch their final assault on the Maidan. They had to move fast. More protesters were on their way to Kiev and risked giving the movement new momentum. Here's how one of the protesters described the moments before the government ambush. At about 5 o'clock in the morning, the situation was getting desperate. Our lines had been pushed back. The barricades on Prodyzhnaya Street and on Kreshchatyk were left unmanned. The others kept asking what we should do when the Berkut launches the offensive. We agreed that we would keep fighting. Yes, wives, children and parents are waiting for us all at home, a man of about 60 sighed. But since we're here, we have to hold out till the end, come what may. There's nothing worse than waiting for danger to come and knowing you're helpless against it. The others started calling their relatives. I won't be able to talk for long, my fellow countryman said on the phone. I'm alright. Don't tell Masha I called, but if you can't reach me in a few hours, tell my wife I love her very much. I took out my phone too. My wife and 3 sons were waiting for me at home. I wanted to call them and tell them something, but there was a lump in my throat. It's starting, our friend Vasya shouted suddenly. They're coming. Looks like Titushki. Turning around, I saw 100 people approaching with shields and bats. On our side, there were no more than 20 of us left. The men walked briskly and confidently. I was about to start flinging stones at them, when for some reason, the strangers stopped about 15 meters away from us. They are with us, I heard Vasya shout. Brothers, one of them said. We're sorry we took so long. They were the Lviv 100. They told us how the police tried to stop them from reaching Kiev. They were stopped several times on the Zhytomyr highway, but they were able to break through the police lines and continue on. The appearance of the group that later came to be known as the Lviv 100 was one of those right place at the right time type situations. With their help, the remaining protesters managed to man the barricades in adequate numbers. However, little did they know that the government had at this point decided to change strategy, evident from the strange, loud bangs that could be heard shortly after.
Okay, so I've got after this. So after the civilian brutality and basically a stalemate, Yanukovych fled Ukraine, assisted by Russian Spetsnaz, and there's a video clip of him somewhere leaving on a helicopter. 8:38.
But the revolutionaries had little time to celebrate their victory. On the 27th of February, unmarked, heavily armed soldiers began seizing government buildings in Crimea. They came to be known as Little Green Men, sporting high-end Russian military gear. On the 1st of March, Putin requested and received official approval from himself, basically, to deploy Russian troops to Ukraine. That was of course a formality, since at that point Crimea was effectively under complete Russian control. 2 weeks later, a referendum was organized, where people could decide whether Crimea should become part of Russia. The two choices were yes and yes. And how did that happen? Option number 1 was, do you support joining Crimea with the Russian Federation as a subject of the Russian Federation? Pretty straightforward. However, option number 2 was the following. Do you support the restoration of the 1992 Crimean Constitution and Crimea's status as a part of Ukraine? The problem is the 1992 Constitution declares Crimea as an independent state. So yeah, we can all see what they did there. In the end, it didn't matter much, since according to the results, 95.5% voted for joining Russia, with an official turnout of 85%. 25%. However, the real turnout was around 40%, with 50 to 60% of people voting for joining Russia. How do we know that? Because the Russian President's Human Rights Council accidentally posted the real statistics, which they then quickly deleted, but not before people took notice. The propaganda surrounding the referendum was part of the Russian narrative of heroic anti-fascism. More on that later. The referendum was of course a complete farce, and there was no question where Crimea would end up eventually. It remains to this day under Russian control, in violation of the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, which Russia agreed to, stating among other things that Russia cannot use force against Ukraine and has to respect its independence and sovereign borders.
Okay, so what happened next is a series of pro-Russian protests across the southeast of Ukraine. And that was countermet with Ukrainian protests that usually vastly outnumbered the former. The biggest protests were in Donetsk and Luhansk, which, if you've been paying attention recently, is something that you know about. And these regions became militant. There was one situation where Donetsk decided to become a People's Republic, and they holed up in a city hall and started throwing Molotov cocktails out the window. 1251. I've got next.
A referendum was held on the 11th of May in the separatist-controlled territories similar to the one in Crimea. If official results are to be believed, 89% voted for seceding from Ukraine. As a relevant side note, at that point the separatists were led by Igor Girkin, a Russian veteran and former FSB officer, who, a day after the referendum, declared himself supreme commander of the Donetsk People's Republic. He called for the destruction of all Ukrainian military units in the area and requested Russian military intervention against the quote-unquote impending NATO invasion and genocide. Now, earlier I've mentioned the Russian narrative of separatists being heroic anti-fascist warriors. This idea is a cornerstone of Russian propaganda, painting the Ukrainian government as basically Nazis, thus establishing some half-baked parallel with Soviet troops fighting actual Nazis during World War II. Over here in reality though, things are a bit different. Of course, pro-Ukrainian far-right elements were also present during the revolution, such as the right sector. However, at no point were they in control of the country, and they remain on the fringes to this day. On top of that, Ukraine's current president, Volodymyr Zelensky, who won a landslide victory in 2019, is a Russian native speaker and Jewish, so it's not exactly the Fourth Reich over there. To the Luhansk regions. On the 9th of May 2014, a group of armed separatists tried capturing the Mariupol police department. Police resisted, but were eventually overwhelmed by superior firepower, leaving 6 of them dead. The police station was burned down in the end. The separatists managed to get a shaky hold on the city for about a month, when on the 14th of June, the city was recaptured by Ukrainian forces. They were aided by Right Sector and Azov volunteers, both far-right ultranationalist groupings. The latter used armored vehicles created from dump trucks, using them as mobile firing positions against the separatists. Once the Ukrainian army blasted into the city, the 6-hour operation began, in which Mariupol was effectively retaken and was made the temporary capital of the Donetsk region. This victory turned out to be crucial later on, since Mariupol is a strategically important city for multiple reasons. It has one of the biggest steel plants in Europe and blocks the way for a land bridge connecting Russia with Crimea. As the conflict dragged on, the Ukrainian army slowly reorganized itself into an at least workable military, which started showing results. The biggest factor here was the Ukrainian Air Force, which managed to inflict heavy losses on the separatists, who were at this point a bunch of loosely organized armed groups with no air defense. The separatist-held areas were shrinking rapidly. It really looked like it's just a matter of time until the insurgency was over. Seeing this, Russia decided to supply the separatists with some heavy anti-air weapons to counter the Ukrainian Air Force.
So, following on from this is the famous downing of the MH17 aeroplane. So this was a plane that was carrying hundreds of Dutch nationals from, I believe, was it Singapore to Amsterdam? And it was shot over the Donbass by one of these weapons that was supplied. And the separatist forces believed it to be a military aircraft. 2025.
As follows. We've just shot down an AN-26 in the Torres area. It fell somewhere around the Progress mine. We've warned them already. Do not fly in our skies. Here's video proof of the bird's descent. The bird crashed past the mine's dump and didn't damage residential areas. No civilians were hurt. There is information about a second down plane, most likely Sukhoi. So that's pretty straightforward. Separatists managed to shoot down a military plane, and now their leader is on social media gloating about it. However, upon inspecting the wreckage, they made a startling discovery.
Значит, самолет рассыпался в воздухе в районе шахты Петропавловской. Первый 200-й. Нашли первого 200-го. Была женщина. Да. Гражданский. Да, Саша.
Ну что у вас там?
Короче, блин, стопудово гражданский борт.
Понятно. А этот, как и, народу много там?
Это пиздец. В обломки прямо во дворы падали тут. Вот так вот.
Ну, борт какой?
Да я еще пока не разобрался, потому что я не был возле основной части. Я только вот смотрю там, где начали первые тела падать. Там остатки внутренних кронштейнов, кресла, тела.
Понятно.
Вот так
Из
вот.
вооружения есть что-нибудь?
И вообще ничего. Гражданские вещи, медицинские ошметки, блин, там полотенце такое, туалетная бумага.
Документы есть?
Да, индонезийского студента есть из университета Томпсона, блин.
По самолету, сбитым в районе Снежного Тереза.
Ну,
Это оказался пассажирский. Упал в районе Грабова, там море трупов, женщины, дети. Сейчас казаки там смотрят это все дело. По телевизору передают вроде бы как этот, Ан-26 украинский
ну,
транспортник. Но, говорят, написано на нем малазийские авиалинии. И что он делал на территории Украины?
ну, значит, завозили шпионов, у них нахуй. Понял? Не
Так
хуй летать,
точно.
блядь, сейчас война идет, блядь.
Together, Russian TV airs clearly fake image to claim Ukraine shot down MH17 by BuzzFeed News. On Friday, Russia's Channel 1 published what it said were satellite photos proving that a Ukrainian government fighter jet shot down Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 in July. Host Mikhail Leontyev, who is also a vice president of the state oil giant Rosneft, said that the pictures were sent to the Russian Union of Engineers by an MIT graduate named George Bilt. Leontyev quoted an email from Bilt in which he said that the plane, quote, was shot down with a classic jet fighter attack from the rear semisphere, end of quote. According to Russian propaganda at the time, MH17 was shot down by a Ukrainian Su-25. The article goes on, Russian bloggers, however, quickly took the claim to pieces. Photographer Rustem Adagamov found that part of the image came from the Google Images cache, dating back to August 2012. Journalist Sergei Parkomenko found several other pictures taken from Yandex.Maps, a Russian site. Also, the fighter plane on the photo published by the Russians doesn't look like a Su-25. It looks more like a Su-27 or MiG-29. Here it is, this is the Su-25, looks nothing like the plane on the picture. Also, the Boeing in the picture turned out to bear a suspicious resemblance to the first Russian-language Google Images result for Boeing View from Above. It had the Malaysia Airlines logo in the wrong place, which turned out to be the Boeing logo. The distance was wrong, the time was wrong, and the Russian Union of Engineers turned out to not add up either. Ivan Andreevsky, the quote-unquote expert quoted in the show, does not appear to have an engineering education. A quick analysis of his PhD turned up obvious signs of plagiarism. And by the way, the Su-25 cannot even reach the altitude of passenger flights, its max altitude clocking in at about 7 kilometers. How did
So yeah, so from this you can see really the first inklings of sort of a mass information war that's been kicking off, and was oncoming back in 2014. This was followed up by basically the little green men that he was talking about, returning this time to the Donbass in southeast. So basically, as soon as Ukraine started winning in the east, unmarked Russian soldiers picked up the slack where their failing people's republics were losing. And there's loads of evidence that they're Russian soldiers. You've got photographs of them on Facebook in Ukraine in the same costumes as they're reported to be in, and then other photos of them in Russian uniform. So Russia's was they were sending soldiers in to help the republics. 2024. Oh, is that right? So let's do 35 to 25.
2015. The following month, however, turned out to be the darkest, most brutal periods of the Donbass War. In the morning of the 25th of January 2015, without warning, separatists fired on Mariupol with so-called Grad multiple rocket launchers. If you ever wondered what that looks like from up close, here you go. The bombardment of Mariupol left 27 dead, the vast majority civilians, including 2 children. No wonder, the rockets were fired directly at a residential area. But what is Grad exactly? I'll let our friends over at Russia Today demonstrate.
19-Grad missiles that were just fired at the Ukrainian army.
Bellingcat later confirmed what everyone already suspected. The shelling was directed by Russian officers and militants. Based on their trajectory estimates, the rockets clearly came from separatist-controlled territories. I've linked their full report in the description, feel free to go over it. This, of course, was a war crime, and it wasn't the last. Landslide. As for the Ukrainian far-right, there were two such parties, Right Sector and Svoboda. The Right Sector won a single seat, while the Svoboda party lost 31 seats. Some people would count the Radical Party, the RPOL, as far-right, but they're more libertarian-leaning tradcons with a slight center-left bent. A pro-Russian party also ran in the elections, the so-called Opposition Bloc, a merger of 6 anti-Maidan parties, including former Party of Regions MPs, winning 27 seats. One of their leading politicians in parliament was Viktor Medvedchuk, local oligarch, notable for his daughter's godfather being Vladimir Putin. I'm not joking. Medvedchuk is considered an ally and close friend of Putin and has worked since 2014 to undermine Ukraine's pro-European course. He did this through his media empire, being the de facto owner of 3 major Ukrainian TV channels, 112 Ukraine, News One, and Zik, which were used to spread Russian narratives. This article goes into detail about how exactly this happened. Feel free to look it up. The 2014 presidential election was won by pro-European Petro Poroshenko by a wide margin. From that point on, Ukraine started its movement towards the EU. The law on decommunization was enacted, aiming to remove all Soviet monuments from public spaces, change Soviet-era names of public spaces, and ban all totalitarian symbols, including Soviet and Nazi ones. According to official statistics, more than 51,000 streets and about 1,000 settlements were renamed, while 1,320 Lenin statues and 1,069 others were removed. Some people got creative though. In Odessa, Lenin was turned into Darth Vader, so they won't have to bother with removal. The red stars were replaced by the Ukrainian trident, while statues and monuments were taken to museums, signaling the end of an era. Decentralization reform was enacted, not the kind Russia wanted, where Donetsk and Luhansk have a veto in foreign policy, but a process of strengthening local governance, giving local communities more sources of funding, and eliminating the top-heavy, over-centralized Soviet structure of government. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church, used as a geopolitical tool by Russia, was allowed to officially secede from the Moscow Patriarchate, negating Russian influence on churchgoers. Vitaly Klitschko, former Ukrainian boxing champion, became the mayor of Kiev, so there's that. Ukraine received a visa waiver, meaning Ukrainians could now travel to the EU without having to get a visa. Due to reforms and improving governance, the economy grew despite the war. Poroshenko during his presidency requested NATO membership multiple times, but nobody in the alliance dared risking such a thing. I want you to consider this in light of recent developments, by the way. Corruption remained an issue though, so in the 2019 presidential election, Poroshenko did not get a second term. A former actor and comedian, Volodymyr Zelensky, won the presidency in a landslide victory, campaigning on anti-corruption and putting an end to the Donbass war. With his candidacy, the traditional East-West divide disappeared. As an anti-corruption, pro-peace centrist, his appeal was universal, and this became a significant problem for the Russian propaganda machine. According to their narrative, Ukraine is ruled by a far-right Western puppet government that wants to eliminate Russian culture, but then Ukraine elects a Russian-speaking Jewish president in a landslide who runs on a platform of peace and reconciliation. On top of that, in the parliamentary elections a few months later, far-right parties won a single seat out of 450. Zelensky's party, Servant of the People, also won in a landslide, gaining 254 seats. The second largest party became the pro-Russian opposition platform with 43 seats, chaired by the aforementioned Viktor Medvedchuk. Oopsie. With the election of Zelensky and his party, the pace of reforms accelerated significantly. The army reform and re-equipment initiated by Poroshenko was continued, resulting in a far more capable military with 405,000 active personnel and 250,000 in reserve. Their re-equipment has been underway for a while now, including with hardware from allies such as Humvees and Javelins. The latter was a pretty big deal, by the way. The reform's momentum also allowed for some unique developments. With Estonian assistance, these...
Okay, we'll leave it there. So, let me go back to that one. So yeah, that was Adam something, going over the story so far. I put his link in the chat just before we went through that. Thoroughly recommend you check out the whole video. There was a bunch of extra stuff in there that I've cut out, but I tried to keep the main points. So what's happened since then, basically? The simple fact is that on the 24th of February this year, 2022, Russia, which was previously posturing tanks on the Ukrainian border, followed through with its threats to invade its neighbor. It just rolled tanks straight over the border. Against all peace talks, all possible discussions of easing of tensions, Vladimir Putin, with the help of Belarus, ordered his soldiers across the border into another sovereign state for the purpose of, as he put it, liberating Ukraine from Nazis. As we've just seen, that's kind of has no basis in reality. What's worse is what followed. So what followed was a blitzkrieg of civilian targets, in an apparent attempt to unmake Ukraine. You see reports of scholars that are experts in the specific matter of genocide recognizing what's happened in Ukraine as a genocide. So not just a wild claim that every politician has that it's like a genocide. It's these are actual academics that study this saying that this has all of the makings of a true actual genocide. So you're talking a concerted effort by Russia to remove Ukraine and Ukrainian culture from the world. Whether that's to re-educate captured civilians in speaking Russian instead of Ukrainian, destroying cultural monuments, supplanting Ukrainian cities with Russian residents, or just straight up massacring Ukrainians wherever they stand. Before the invasion, the Russian state named Ukraine as their brothers and sisters, and that's from a Western leaning point of view, that's very hard to imagine that being the case now. So from what we've seen is that the true goal of the invasion was to first and foremost dismantle the Western leaning Ukrainian government, which was led by Zelensky. The idea was to supplant the elected officials with puppet leaders that were more lenient to Moscow and Moscow's commands, basically. Whether that was an attempt to conquer all of Ukraine or simply create some kind of buffer state between Moscow and NATO, I'm not an expert enough to say. And that plan, of course, has failed dramatically. We're around 90 days into a conflict that Russia and Belarus claimed would only take 3 days. And that's because of extremely poor management of military logistics, low troop morale, old equipment, and all of these flatlines the primary goals of the invasion. Putin's belief that Ukraine is simply a mistake of history, as that he could just sweep aside, has become one of the biggest military miscalculations in European history. And that's in no small part because of the valiant effort of Ukrainians to protect their homeland. So upon retreating to the east, Russia's new and current target at this point in time, so Donbass and Donetsk and Luhansk, what then transpired was that in those areas that Russia had controlled and retreated from, mountains of evidence of mass humanitarian crimes were uncovered. So in towns like Bucha, civilians shot in the street riding bicycles. There were basements that were converted into makeshift torture and execution chambers. Women, violated in the most horrific ways, and even worse, children who you think would be immune to this kind of debasement, were not. And it's really hard reading sometimes. I could go on. People burned to hide evidence of wrongdoing, buried in manholes, buried in mass graves, from a dog thrown in a washing machine with a grenade, to a crying child taped to their dead mother with a landmine tucked between them. It's hard to comprehend these things and understand how human beings are capable of that kind of barbarity. And it's harder still to reconcile that such things are happening in Europe in the 21st century. This is the kind of thing that you hear about in the Dark Ages, in medieval times, where they would throw dissidents into just a hole in the ground and leave them there. It's a strange kind of world we're living in now. So yeah, you're up to date. You're up to date on where we are. So why are we streaming today? We're streaming to help Ukrainian people exercise their right to exist, basically. We're an educational YouTube channel with a voice that goes out to, over 12,000 people. And in times like this, we have a responsibility to do what we can to educate, and to provide knowledge and an accurate representation of the facts as they're available. We educate first, we entertain second. And that's where we are. So again, I'll just jump straight over to the screen, and we are doing a fundraiser for humanitarian aid for Ukrainians that have no business fighting, have no business finding themselves on the front line in harm's way, that are finding themselves in harm's way. This is to provide, medical supplies, blankets for people that are having to sleep in metro stations, sanitary products for women. It's very important, and that's why we're raising funds today. We're not raising money for guns or bombs or anything like that. We're not into that. It's basically to help people to stay healthy and stay alive and stay well. Yeah. Dark stuff over, I promise you. Right, where are we? Let me just take a quick breather. So, I'm gonna take a 5-minute break in a second. Let all that digest so that we can come back fresh. We're gonna lighten things up a bit afterwards, I promise. We're gonna start into some Ukrainian Slavic mythology next. And I just want to remind people, as I said at the start, this is not a stream as an invitation to spread misinformation and hate and propaganda. If we see it, you get banned, you'll get removed from the YouTube channel forever. And if it happens enough, then this stream is coming to a close, and you'll not get all the juicy content we've been making, which is not good. So yeah, I'm gonna take 5 minutes. I'll be back in a jiff, and when we've all cooled off, we'll go into some mythology. Cool. That button. Right. We're back. So, sorry, I had to refresh my drink and relieve myself, unfortunately. I've been drinking too much Pepsi recently. It's not good for me. So, as I said before the break, we're going to do some Slavic mythology next. And, when I say Slavic mythology, I mean stuff related to Ukraine. So we've tried to lean into the Ukrainian side of Slavic mythology, as it's obviously it's more relevant to this stream. We want to expose Ukrainian culture. We want to expose Ukrainian myths and legends and history and Ukrainian arts. Pretty much as a show of this is what's at threat. This is what's at risk by what's happening in the world right now. Pretty much everything you hear about today in these bits of content we've made is relevant to the people who lived within the current borders of Ukraine as they are now. Obviously, those borders have switched and changed over time. So not all of this is strictly Ukrainian, but we've leaned into it as much as we can. There's only so much you can do. And we're going to start off with some mythical creatures. And the first up is a creature called a Chuhaister. Chuhaister. I had trouble spelling that for ages. I was writing the script for this, and I kept putting Chugheister, and I was like, why do I keep putting a G in that? There's no G in that. What am I doing? But yeah, let's do that. Chuheister. Let me give me a second to figure this out. So in western Ukraine, you can find a protector of the forest. He is a friend to those that walk his wooded lands, guiding and helping the people who cross his path. His name is Chuhaister. Chuhaister is a mythical spirit from Slavic mythology. The tales of this being mostly come from between western Ukraine and northern Romania, or more specifically the eastern Carpathian Mountains on Ukraine's side. He is likely a creation of the Hutsuls, an ethnic group encompassing peoples between Ukraine and Romania that are these days normally referred to as a Ukrainian subgroup due to their population densities. The lands these people inhabit are mountainous highlands scattered with forests and pastures. Chuhaister is a friendly forest spirit. His name is sometimes Forest Man or Forest Grandfather. He bears a strong resemblance to the Slavic mythical creature named the Leshy, who himself is also sometimes referred to as Forest Man. He is a giant old man, the size of a fir tree, who wanders the forests naked with long scraggly hair obscuring his features. His attributes hide under tufts of white and black beard and unkempt bodily locks. Perhaps his eyes are blue or toad-like. Perhaps his lisping words reveal a toothless mouth. Perhaps his feet are clawed or hooved. With the hair, you can never tell. This spirit wanders only the forests, where the air is the most agreeable to him. He sleeps in the thickets, curled up tightly into a ball, and when he's lucky, at the firesides left by humans. Chuhaister hunts dangerous spirits, similar to mermaids that are called mavka. He tears them apart and eats them, in turn saving all those who would fall prey to them. In winter, he sneaks into the chimneys of huts to warm himself over the heat of the fireplace, singing his songs with the howling wind. What is true about this spirit is that he is wise. He is good and he is cheerful. Chuhaister loves to dance and sing and play the flute. He entices people to dance with him, whether they want to or not, almost to the point of breaking their shoes. He tells people wandering the forests to not be afraid of him, and enjoys talking and smoking by the fireside. Chuhaister brings his mavka prey to the woodland fire, and enjoys roasting his supper there. He can teach crafts, gift talents, and if called upon by knocking 3 times on a tree, can come to rescue someone from an evil spirit. Some tales speak of shepherds or forest dwellers who leave offerings for Chuhaister in order to bring him to their area. Food such as soup are provided due to the spirit's perceived lack of teeth. Other times he's gifted bread and salt, the symbols of Ukrainian hospitality, placed comfortably on high branches. If the food is gone after a period of time, then celebrations are had that Chuhaister is around and therefore Mavka and other dark spirits cannot be. But is Chuhaister really good? You would think so, and normally the answer is yes, but not in all cases. Some versions of Chuhaister despise any person except those who understands and respects the ways of the forest. Be wary not to whistle or shout in the forests, some say, unless you hang a Chuhaister who enjoys whistling and shouting himself. Chuhaister, when angry, can lure people into a forest to make them lost, an act that can only be counteracted by wearing clothes inside out. If you call out in reply to a shout of a Chuhaister, you connect with the dangerous spirit world, and you can actually confuse him. He will come to investigate the sound, investigate the quality of the responder's dwelling, and, if satisfied, annoy that person with incessant investigative questioning, even if they're asleep. If he's not satisfied with the dwelling, he can scare herds. In the absence of sufficient bucket water, for example, he can steal away children in an apparent attempt to protect them from fires. So what is the backstory of this creature? Where does it come from? This again has some variation. The most accepted origin of Chuhaister is sadly that of a curse. He was once a man who offended his neighbour. In return, he was cursed to wander the forest until the end of the world, never dying. In this, he is immortal and cannot be harmed by anyone, physical or spiritual. Over the years, it is said that his clothes have rotted and ragged away to nothing, leaving him naked, but some tales do describe white linen clothes garbed around him. One version of Chuhaister is that he is not one man, but 7 men. 7 brothers, in fact, all cursed the same way to become 7 different Chuhaister. What other powers does this spirit have? As with many Slavic creatures, Chuhaister has lots of described forms, powers, and appearances. So far we've averaged out a baseline physical description and his traits, but there's also a number of other abilities this spirit has shown in his various tales. When he hunts Mavka, it is said that his aggression can carry with it a great wind that causes the howling sounds of the forest. Sometimes Chuhaister is the voice on that wind, or even the wind itself. It is said that Chuhaister can remove one of his own legs to chop down trees, and can run speedily on the remaining leg by itself. He's so strong that he can simply tear trees out of the ground. He can transform and change and become different things, such as wolves. Finally, in 2 of the tales that will shortly be covered, Chuhaister has the gift of foresight. Let's cover some of these simple tales. The first speaks of a woman wishing for the blessing of children. She goes to the forests, finds Chuhaister, and challenges him to a dancing contest. She doesn't win, but impresses the spirit enough that he offers to fulfill her wish anyway. There is a caveat though. Chuhaister warns her that she will have twin girls, but they will be worth nothing alone, and would only find their worth relying on each other. The woman is pleased and happy to become a mother. On the day of the birth, it is revealed that one of the girls is born without hands, and the other without sight. Regardless, the woman and her husband lovingly raised the children. The one who could see but couldn't act learned to instruct her sister who could act but couldn't see. The twins learned to always help each other, and eventually to live in happiness. The moral of the story surrounds the idea of mental and physical labour, and that one of these is useless without the other. A second tale speaks of a shepherd who discovered Chuhaister snuggling up in his hearth. The shepherd slammed his axe into the ground, blade side up, which had the effect of bringing Chuhaister under his control. He told the spirit to sit on the blade of the axe, and refused to release him. In payment for his freedom, Chuhaister speaks of an upcoming bear and wolf attack on the farmer's herd, which helps the farmer to prepare and protect them. Finally, there's a tale of how 2 men forced a sighting of Chuhaister. They brought a new, large sack and went to the border of 2 meadows. They climbed into the sack at midnight, their heads exposed out of the top, facing different directions. Chuhaister goes around the meadows at night, and when he discovered the bag, he had to push it aside as he was unable to go around it. The 2 men remained as stationary as possible, appearing dead. The spirit commented, "I have been around the mountain of Svidova and all 77 meadows on it, but I've never seen such a miracle as one corpse with 2 heads. Chuhaister left the pair of them and then wandered off into the night. As a mythical creature, Chuhaister is not just a physical being, but a spiritual being. Why not go out into the woods yourself and pay respects to him? He will know. What do you think? How did we do? I'm seeing a few cheers on the Twitch chat. So yeah, we've got a few more bits and bobs like that to go. Be a bit of a drive for me to go out there and pay respects to the beastie. That's fair, you know. I think it's. I'm in Scotland, so there's a lot more wilderness right around the corner. But yeah, it's. Oh, thanks. Sounds great. So yeah, we've got a few more of those. I've got a. I think that's one of the longer ones. I've got one that I think is a bit longer than that one. And all of these as well, I'm gonna upload to the YouTube channel afterwards, individually, so that you can rewatch them at your leisure. They won't be public on the channel. I'll put the links in into a community page. They won't be public because these are really kind of a first draft thrown together. Overachiever much. Thanks, Rue. These aren't really quality enough to be considered full YouTube videos yet. I think I'd have to re-record the voiceover and clean it up a lot more. But yeah, I think we did all right, and it's a nice bit of extra for you to watch when you want. So what have I got next on the docket? We're still on mythology, I believe. I'm trying to zoom out of AVG. It's not letting me. 1 second. There we go. Right. So that was Chuhaister. That was very Ukrainian creature. I think there was a thing that I was reading about with him, which was like he's from the same area as the original sort of creatures that inspired the idea of vampires and Dracula. You know, he's on the border of Romania and Ukraine, and you've got Transylvania in Romania, so that's fun as well. Now, what we're going to do is move into a shorter mythological video. This is scripted out by Rue, who is in the chat. I'm only seeing a black screen. Is that how it's supposed to be, or something wrong? Are you seeing a black screen? Is everyone seeing a black screen? Have I broken something? You should be seeing me, if I'm honest. Try refreshing, Kitty. So yeah, the next thing we're going to move into is a shorter mythological video. This one scripted out by Rue. Rue is in the chat, so you can pay all your respects to him. There's quite a few smaller ones that Rue's put together. This one is about a very creepy thing that I'd never heard of, called an Iron Woman, who is I believe something like the Rye Woman or something like that, the Woman of Rye. So let's move into that. Let me I've got over once. I've come back, and I'm not going to be able to go back again. Hold on. So let me mute myself and then move into Iron Woman zone. So
the Slavic regions of the world hold many tales of creatures and humanoids that are a shared cultural mythos. Each culture speaks of them in slightly different manners. Take the Rye Mother, which originated in Germanic areas but spread to the northern Ukrainian region over time. It goes by other monikers as well, and in Ukraine it is known as Zalizna Zinka, or the Iron Woman. This creature resembles an older woman, with a grotesque appearance that would send a shiver down anyone's spine. Often depicted as carrying an iron sickle and a mortar, as well as having ironclad nipples, she haunted the rye and grain fields of the region. Should a child stray too far unattended into the fields, where they shouldn't have gone in the first place, it is said that the Iron Woman would quickly capture the child, striking out with her iron sickle. Once captured, she would force the child to suckle upon her iron teat to consume her blackened milk. This would make the child severely ill or even hallucinate, but should this not kill the child, she would then take the child and grind them up in her mortar for her own consumption. The similarities of this tale to a real-world condition known as ergotism is quite striking, to say the least. Ergotism, also known as holy fire or St. Anthony's fire, was a condition brought on by a fungal disease of grain plants in the region. The fungus, ergo, would cause these plants to have black growths, deformities, and lesions upon them, and should these tainted grains be consumed, depending on how much was consumed, people would develop conditions such as seizures, vomiting, gangrene, psychosis, hallucinations, and even death. This tale could also be interpreted as a cautionary tale to children to avoid the fields in times when the contraction of these ailments was not too well understood.
Okay. It seems that everyone's having trouble with the stream for some reason. I am streaming still, I believe. Let me just make sure. It looks like my stream is still going through on YouTube. I can copy the link for the YouTube one if it makes it a bit easier. Let me find it. Yeah. No, not that one. That one. So if you're having trouble watching it on Twitch, you can go to this link. And it should be streaming there as well. If you're struggling, and we can do it that way. So, that was the Iron Woman. It's very creepy. I hate that idea of yeah, she's so gross that you have to suckle her iron teat to get the black milk. Kind of reminds me of like, you know, a few years ago when they found that sarcophagus and it was just full of black goop. And there was like a petition online to get the archaeologists to taste the forbidden black goop of the black sarcophagus. Like it's so wrong. It hits some trigger in my brain that I hate. Okay. So next, what else we're gonna do for mythical creatures? Let me have a look at my docket. Right. So we do have an oldie that we're going to go back to. So you've seen the True Heister, which is new content. You've seen the Iron Woman, which is new content. And we're going to go back to something that we've already seen before. We're going to go back to the humble Domovoy, who is just as valid a creature in Ukraine as he is in Russia. He might have a different name, but, you know, it's important to highlight that he is a Ukrainian creature as well. So I'm going to put that on, and we'll go through that. If I can figure it out. Domovoy, more like my Doma boy. Yeah. You know, let's go.
It is said that in every home dwells a spirit. You can almost never see him, but he's there, wandering about your home. He is mischievous and demanding, but also gentle and important. The name of this spirit is Domovoy, and he drives our fortunes whilst protecting us from harm. The Domovoy are house spirits from Slavic mythology. Their name comes from the word dom, which means house. Many modern-day Russians, if asked, will state that they still believe in Domovoy today. The Domovoy have different forms and ways of operating based on where they are and what tale was told. They have a complex history that goes all the way back to pagan Russia. A Domovoy cannot normally be seen. However, there are widely accepted versions of what they look like. Traditionally, a Domovoy takes on the appearance of a gentle old man. He looks like a hunched grandfather with wrinkled skin, gray hair, and a long white beard. His eyes glow like fire in the night and can flash at people who catch a glimpse of him. A domovoi is small, sometimes described as an elf or dwarf. Specifically, in some places, he can be no taller than the height of a 5-year-old boy. His clothing can change from location to location as well. Where one place might say that he wears a red shirt with blue girdle, another might say he wears a blue kaftan with a red girdle. The domovoi find their root origins in ancestor worship, a belief that the spirits of the dead linger to dictate the fortunes of the living. To reflect this, some tales say that the domovoi has the ability to transform. He can turn into regular animals like cats or dogs. It is common for him to transform into the ancestors of the current residents, or even the current residents themselves. He can even wear the clothes of the proprietor of the house, reflecting back the Slavic ideal of someone who works hard and lives a simple life. In modern times, the domovoi mutated a fair bit from the bearded sprites of the pagans. With the advent of Christianity in Europe, this creature found itself taking on more unsightly and demonic characteristics. A domovoi can be imagined today as a creature covered in thick, unkempt hair, all the way from its palms to the base of its feet. Sometimes he has horns and a pointed tail like a sort of impish hobgoblin. Inside the home of pagan Slavs and many other cultures, there is a distinct relationship between ancestry and the hearth of the home, a place of warmth, light, and food. Because of this, domovoi lives wherever fire can be found. His chief and most preferred abode is hiding inside the hearth. He can also live inside or near the stove, or under the candlelit threshold of the house. He can be found near baths as they are brought to temperature, where he takes on the form of a creature called a bannock. This is not to say that the creature can't be found anywhere else, though. This mythical creature is otherworldly, found both in specific places of the home, but also all parts of the house at the same time. A domovoi is chiefly a protector of a house and its land. He defends the home from dangers like natural disasters, thieves, fires, and disease. He stops incursions by his evil counterpart, the Kikimora, and other invading bad spirits. He can do favors for the family, like hop to other homes to steal food or grain. He can also do little chores for the household, like babysit children as their imaginary friend. He can wander out at night and take care of livestock or farmed produce. The Songs of the Russian People, by William Ralston and Sheldon Ralston, state, "It is considered dangerous, also, to pass the night in a corn kiln, for the domovoi may strangle the intruder in their sleep." A domovoi can be a fickle spirit. He requires appeasement of food, good actions, and smart rituals to keep him doing his duties. Each night, a family will leave a portion of its supper near the hearth for the domovoi to eat. They will clear away their dishes and leave the place clean, tidy, and peaceful. If the inhabitants are lazy, ill-mannered, dirty, don't honor their ancestors, or forget to feed their domovoi, he can start to become mischievous. Without food, he can knock tables and benches about in frustration. He can do things like pull the hair of people in the household, lie on a person's chest at night, or pinch the family when they aren't looking. He can break plates, jump around making banging, creaking, or scratching noises in the house. He can even yell out in the night. A domovoi can only be brought back to calm by offerings of food and righting of the wrongs he finds offensive. If a family doesn't change, a domovoi will eventually up and leave for another home. Without a domovoi, a house will not survive evil and ill fortune for very long. Another thing to recognize is a domovoi's jealousy. For instance, the autumn offering of a goose to the water spirit Vadyani must be taken with care. If the domovoi finds a household has sacrificed to another spirit than himself, he will greatly lose his temper and will have to be appeased. One important aspect of having a domovoi is interpreting its tantrums and noises. This is because domovoi is said to be able to predict the future. His outbursts can be taken as omens, good or bad. Wails or groans might reflect the coming of a death or some other disaster. Singing may predict incoming wealth or plenty. Determining what a domovoi means with its creaking, banging, and yelling could be the difference between happiness and misery. Other aspects of the creature can also affect this determination. For instance, a domovoi is said to sometimes stroke the face of the family as they sleep. If its hand is cold, the omen is ill. As fickle and temperamental as he can be, a domovoi will never leave the outer boundaries of his abode unless he is absolutely forced to do so. In Poland, there is a belief that a domovoy is so tied to its home that it will continue living inside the stone even if the entire house burns down. This has created the phrase, "In the old stove the devil warms," and tales like "About the devil in the stove." He is so tied that when people move from home to home, they have to entice their domovoy to go with them. A house without a domovoy is like a house without a soul. There is a common ritual where ash from the stove is collected and carried to the new home, inviting their domovoy to come with the family. The new abode doesn't have to be a house either. Even apartments in big cities can house a domovoy. That's it. Thanks for watching. Have you heard?
There you go. Domovoy is like a magical borrower. You're right. He's like a he's a cheeky little bugger, to be honest. I've still got the Domovoy wooden sculpture over there. You could tell that I was running out of footage for the video because there was points where I was just like, how else can I use this? Like, what else can I possibly do to utilize this little figure of a Domovoy to get footage for this video? Right. Anyway, let's see how the GoFundMe's doing. So let me just switch over to the old Screeny Bopple. We've raised $35. Ruin Adra, thank you very much. I know you donated about 8 hours ago, it says, but thank you very much for donating, guys. It's very, very important. And Olga, thank you very much, Olga, for the £5. That's it's very decent of you. I mean, even if we only raise what, 50 quid, £50, that would be £50 worth of humanitarian aid, which is decent amount. You know, how much is a roll of toilet paper, right? So let's keep going. Let's see what we can do. I'm gonna copy this and shove this back in the chat, and we'll see what comes out of it. But again, the idea is that we are raising money for for humanitarian aid in Ukraine, and this stream is about exposing Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian history, Ukrainian mythology, the arts. Oh, thank you very much, Liv, for telling your mum to donate on your behalf. That's very kind of you. We'll try and raise as much as we can in the stream, and the fundraiser will stay open after the stream as well. If you're watching this on on demand or something, and I think I've set the chat so that you can do the chat replay on that as well, so you'll be able to see that. But yeah, 35, doing all right, not bad. 35. Where am I at now? What am I doing? So we've just done Domovoy. Oh, is that next? So next up, we are going to be doing some food. So we're out of the mythology side. Oh, I live. I'm not sure what that means. We're out of the mythology side, and we're going to take a couple of minutes break, about a 5-minute break, because we're going to make some Ukrainian food. My other half, Claire, has been preparing food. We've not made it yet. What am I doing? I'm doing a lot. Thanks, Rue. So Claire's prepared some bits. We had a look at some Ukrainian recipes, and we've got the ingredients for it. No idea how this is gonna go. I've got the Android camera, so you'll be able to see us doing it. But I have no idea how this is gonna go. I've got 2 parts to this planned out, so we're gonna do the making of the food, and then it's gonna go away and cook. And then we're going to do some stuff in between, and then when it's cooked, we'll be going back to, try it out and see what we think. But give me a couple of minutes, and I'll get all that prepped. Okay. So I'm not sure whether this is picking this up correctly or not. Me, is that working, Droid Cam? This one. Yeah, so we've got the Droid Cam. I just don't know if we've got microphone access on this. Phone cam. Let me change the properties on that 1 second. Hopefully we've got audio. But if not, then we'll be watching silent disco of us making food. You hear me so far because I'm still sat in the room with the microphone, but we'll soon find out. Anyways, what we're making, just so you know, in case we lose audio entirely, is we're making like potato fritter things, and we've prepped them, and it's like a cabbage potato thing, but we'll soon find out. So let's go on an adventure, shall we? It's cabbage! So, I'm coming back to the microphone to explain the situation. So, we've got no mic, but if you go over to the Twitch chat, you can see me talking about stuff that's going on. So, we're making like a potato thing, a grated potato thing, which, as Rue says, looks like a pancake. It's made of onions, egg, flour, salt, pepper, salt, cream, and potatoes. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but we're cooking it. That's what's going on. I've not got any microphone access at all on this droid cam. I should probably get one of those ones you can walk around with, but it's too late. we have these potato things. Let's I'll keep. Come on, you should come in. I'm just gonna switch the camera over to chatting, and we are eating potato, whatever they were called. Do you want to try that? I'm holding it.
I've got your fork as well.
They don't look as thick as the recipe, right?
I think they're about as thick. Oh my god, I should have got a knife.
Is that good? You can be the guinea pig.
Okay.
It's okay, she says. It's a bit bland. I've got to say. I don't mean to criticize Slavic food or anything, but that's really. I've got a lot of flavour to it, considering how much onions in it and potato.
The sour cream improved it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not terrible. It reminds me of like hash brown. Kind of.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. It does have a hash brownness to it.
I did think that though when I was cooking everything, there's nothing else other than salt and pepper in everything that I've made.
Maybe it's a cultural thing. Maybe there's not a lot of, I guess, spices or anything on show, which is kind of surprising because they're closer to, say, the Silk Roads than we are.
Because I was tempted when I was cooking the pork to put extra stuff in. I was like, no, because I'm one for the.
Purity.
I get a recipe, and I always add stuff when I make a recipe. I was like, no, I will do it as I am told by the Ukrainian chef online. I will not change it.
The Ukrainian chef told me not to add anything else.
Yeah. You can have the rest of that if you want.
I'll take the rest of that. Cool. Thank you very much, Master Chef.
Question is.
You may as well make the rest. You've already done the ingredients. Shove some spices in it if you want. Mix it up a little bit. Put your own flair on it. Claire's flares.
What I feel would be a really advantage to it. Cheese.
Cheese. Now you're talking.
Put cheese in the mixture and then fry it.
Everything better with cheese.
Absolutely.
So the other thing then is the cabbage stuff.
Yeah.
So
do you want me to show making one?
Well, when you finish doing the other potato things, then
Right,
just call me in and I'll.
You just want me to cook them up and set them aside?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You all should have reached out to me about how to make draniki. Draniki, says Liv. Yeah, we should have. We should have reached out to the peeps. The true peeps. That was alright though. I've still got a little bit here. I'm going to be scoffing these while we're continuing on with the stream. In the background, Claire's going to be cooking up the rest of them, and there's another thing as well, which is the it's like a cabbage roll filled with rice. I'm not entirely sure. This was not the way. Let's live. It's not as fat as it looks like in the picture. I feel like, like when you have when you see, say, a British pancake, which is more like a like a crepe, versus an American pancake, which is like a buttermilk big fat thing. I feel like it's kind of the same thing. So the image looks like it's a big fat American pancake, but we've got like a really thin. Yeah. Right then, that was some Ukrainian food. We're going to be coming back to that as we go. They're not supposed to be too thick. The thickness was good. So we did it better than the Ukrainian chef with his ingredients. That's what we're saying. That's what we're saying. Right. So next. While Claire's in the background sorting some more food out, we are going to go into history. So we've done some mythology. We did the Juheister, we've done the Iron Woman, we've done the Domovoy, and now we're going to go into some history. And we're going to start off with another one of Rue's scripts. Rue's done quite a lot, I have to say. He's really made this stream today. And the first video is we're going to talk about White Arbor, which is a landmark in Ukraine, and there's a bit of history about that. So let's go into White Arbor, if I can remember how to do this.
In the city of Poltava, Ukraine, there stands a monument that was erected, destroyed, and erected again since 1909. This monument is known as the White Arbor and was originally created as a memorial to the Battle of Poltava, which occurred 200 years earlier in July 1709. The battle itself was in response to the Great Northern War, which had raged on between the allied nations of Russia, Norway, and Poland as they were seeking emancipation from the overreaching rule of Sweden within the region. The Battle of Poltava came to be as Sweden was eager to take Moscow, but due to the weather and being low on supplies, they had decided to take the fortress city of Poltava from Russian occupancy for themselves. Learning of this, the Russians had sent forces to defend this major point of interest. The battle was quick to land in favor of the Russians, and they were able to drive out the Swedish forces. This loss more than swayed the war in favor of Russia, Norway, and Poland, and in time, Sweden would be pushed out of its role as a major power ruling over the region. It was 200 years after the battle that a monument was erected to commemorate the battle that had taken place there. During World War II, this monument would be brought to the ground during battle. But in 1954, reconstruction occurred and the monument stands once more.
Interesting that, we've got it's crazy how interconnected, I guess, Russian and Ukrainian society was. You talk about kind of the Soviet era, they were essentially one country, right? So there's quite a lot of intertwining Russian-Ukrainian history. And you're talking about Sweden and Poland. We're going to be going into another topic which covers them a lot. And let me see if I can remember which topic was going next before I spoil it. Nope. Okay, so next we're going to be going into another one by Rue, which is about ancient history. So it surprised me actually when I first read Rue's script that Ukraine has a lot of ancient history. Ukraine is a big wide expanse of flat land, or steppe, and I didn't expect there to be a lot of ancient history in Ukraine. It's an unforgiving land, I guess, but apparently there is, and there's an ancient culture that they're still digging up today. So we're going to go into that, and here we.
The peoples known as the Trypillians existed within the years of 5400 to 2700 BC, and they held quite a significance when compared to other cultures of the time, as they had advancements far beyond the norm. They were also known by another name, the Cucuteni Trypillia. They are known for building proto-cities, and were some of the first true civilizations that ever existed. The Trypillians settled in the Eastern European regions, which is comprised of today's Ukraine, Romania, and Moldova, and this region was the central hub of their civilization. Predating the Mesopotamians, they are considered to be some of, if not the first, true civilization. However, all that remains of them are their artifacts and structures, as to this day, no human remains have ever been found of them. Skilled in technologies considered to be advanced for their time, they were keen with metallurgy, but also their agricultural prowess. They would change their settlement locations in order to offset their farming needs, but they were not nomadic by any means. Not only were they leaders in metallurgy and agriculture, but they were also skilled with pottery and architecture as well. In 2009, a 6,000-year-old temple was found in Nebelivka, Ukraine, which was only recently delved into in detail to probe its contents. The findings in the temple enlightened researchers of a culture that made sacrifices to their deities, though it did not appear that human sacrifices were on the agenda. They determined this by the discovery of burnt lamb bones within the temple not far from the clay platforms.
There you go. Ancient society in Ukraine. Never would have guessed it. I'd be interested to see I guess what comes out of, I guess, the current conflict. They're digging trenches everywhere, and they've got to come across something, right? I think I saw a report the other day which was saying they found ancient pottery in one of the trenches that Russia left behind. So this kind of stuff could create it's a terrible thing to happen, but could create a quantum leap in historical knowledge for Ukraine's ancient past. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm going to just quickly, again, go back to the GoFundMe. And we're going to see where we are. We're still on 35, I bet. Still on 35. I'm just going to share this again with the chat. And remind that we are today raising money for Ukraine to get humanitarian aid for them. So we're raising money for the British Ukrainian Aid, which is a non-profit which looks to, get things like sanitary supplies for women, blankets, food, important stuff to help people survive and help people get through what is a terrible conflict. So we're not buying grenades, we're not buying missiles or anything like that for people. We're raising money to buy things that actually help real people that are struggling when they shouldn't be. Right then, let's move back into our thing. So we've just covered the Trypillian civilization. We've covered one of the national monuments, which went over a little bit of history with Russia and Ukraine and Sweden and Poland. And their relationships are a lot older than you would think. And we're going to look at that through the lens of the next topic, which is the Cossacks. Now, you may or may not know what the Cossacks are, but just to overview them, they are and were a historical peoples who lived in what is now modern-day Ukraine. Oh, you made some more.
I added cheese and cayenne pepper.
You've added cheese and cayenne pepper.
Yeah.
Right. Let me
see how they compare. I'm making 2 more. There's 2 more.
There's 2 more for you, yeah.
Well, I'm going to try them once these ones are out. Yeah, but I want to see what your thoughts are. I haven't tried them yet.
Okay, right. I'll let you know. So the next thing we're going to look at is the Cossacks, and they were an ancient peoples. Well, say ancient, Middle Ages, 1300s up to about the 1800s, who lived in what is modern day Ukraine, and modern day Ukrainians look at them like basically the precursor states to what is Ukraine now. What's going on, Claire? I'll get to the end of my sentence eventually. Right. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to go over the Cossacks. We've got a nice long 12-minute video or so covering essentially their foundings, who they are, up to pretty much the end of the important period of their time. So let's watch that. You go back to my screen and turn on. If we were to talk about the history of Ukraine, one important piece of Ukraine's cultural heritage must be to speak about the Cossacks. This is the warrior nomadic people of the Cossack Hetmanate, a place even the Ottomans referred to as the Ukrainian state all the way back in 1672. Today, the Cossacks are romanticized for their bravery, their love of freedom, and their love of fraternity. Their history is complicated, but we'll try to break it down a bit. First off, let's talk about the Cossack structure to get accustomed. The one thing to understand about the Cossacks is that they had a self-organized society outside of the norms of the, at the time, regular national identities. They were broken into groups named hosts and led by an elected military commander and eventual political head of state named a hetman. The key peoples we care about in this rundown are the Zaporozhian Cossacks, the peoples that lived within the modern borders of Ukraine. These peoples are often seen as the precursor society to the Ukrainian state and the ideal of Ukrainian nationhood. In fact, during the Soviet era of Ukraine, attention was specifically drawn away from the Cossacks lest it create a national movement of independent statehood. When we talk about the history of the Cossacks, there are really three main nations at play: Russia, Poland or Poland-Lithuania, and the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire usually comes into play here in the form of their child state, the Crimean Khanate. All three of these nations, you will see, jostle for control of Ukrainian Cossack lands. The people known as the Cossacks are likely to have come into existence around the 13th century in what is now modern-day Ukraine. They were a collection of different cultures, both ethnic and religious, that came together under a collection of like-minded, self-governing communities. To the south of their lands sat the Crimean Khanate, populated by the people we now call Tatars. To the north and the east, the fledgling Russian state, steadily growing after the decline of Constantinople. And to the north and west, the Polish Commonwealth, encompassing Poland and modern-day Lithuania. Originally, the Cossacks were likely victims of serfdom that fled their homelands. The preference was to nomadically wander in the endless, sparsely populated Ukrainian steppes with relative freedoms from taxation and lordship. At the time, Ukrainian land was technically a region governed by Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, but the Cossacks quickly became the dominant force in the area, carving out a chunk of land which came to be known as the Zaporozhian Sich. The Cossacks were a very powerful group that fought for whichever side treated them with the most respect. They lived to self-govern and be recognized as an equal and self-governing community. They began with close ties to the Polish Commonwealth, and they fought alongside that Commonwealth in a number of wars. Poland had been treating the Cossacks with contempt for a while, whether that was refusing to pay the wages of the troops, not respecting the Cossacks' self-governing nature, not protecting their religion, and so on. Things came to a head in 1647, when the heir to an influential Polish magnate attempted to seize the lands of the Polish lesser noble turned Cossack, Bohdan Khmelnytsky. Khmelnytsky had previously risen through the Cossack ranks. Upon repeated trips to Warsaw by Khmelnytsky, the Polish king appeared reluctant to rein in the magnate responsible for the land issue. Khmelnytsky sought aid from his Cossack brothers, and after being arrested, he triggered a Cossack uprising. Khmelnytsky's support grew more and more, and he was eventually elected hetman of the Zaporozhian Sich. He made an agreement for the aid of the Crimean Khanate in payment of money and slaves. Cossacks that were originally loyal to the Polish Commonwealth flocked to his side, and he was able to make demands of the Polish state over missing wages for his troops. The uprising led to the promise of a Ukrainian or Ruthenian state. This includes a government, Ruthenian or Ukrainian language, and all nicely under the rule of Bohdan Khmelnytsky. Khmelnytsky is said to have positioned himself not only as hetman of the Cossacks, but the ruler of the Ruthenian lands and lord of all Rus. Pressing his political advantage too far, he suffered defeat in battle in 1651. Poland had paid the Crimean Khanate to abandon Khmelnytsky. He was captured and forced to sign a peace agreement that removed all of Poland's prior war concessions. This agreement was never ratified by the Commonwealth's parliament, though. The plan for a full nation state became impossible to implement, After another battle where the Cossacks realigned with the Crimean Khanate, the Cossacks were forced to switch their allegiances to Moscow, signing a treaty of loyalty to the Tsar in 1654. This triggered a war between Russia and Poland as a result. During the uprising and the associated war with Russia, Polish peoples were rapidly killed or ejected from Cossack land, a period now known in Poland as the Deluge. Sweden entered the war in order to take advantage of the uncertainty. Russia and Poland agreed a peace treaty to present a united front against Sweden, and the Cossacks felt they were betrayed by Russia, switching their allegiances then to Sweden. Upon the sudden death of the hetman Bohdan Khmelnytsky, a power vacuum opened up in the Cossacks over who should replace him. Bohdan had mentioned his intention to install his own son Yuri as hetman, but his son was only 16, and a controversial choice for leader. Meanwhile, Poland were able to take advantage of this time to re-establish control over the Ruthenian lines and the Zaporozhian Sich. The Cossacks elected Ivan Vysotsky as hetman instead of Bohdan's son. Ivan was pushed towards cooperation with Poland, with whom the Cossacks still held much regarded animosity. Russian leading Cossacks sent word to Russia, and Moscow made a great deal of effort to let everyone know that they were accepting the authority of Cossack dissidents and didn't agree with Ivan's selection as hetman. A rival to Ivan's position emerged in the Moscow-leaning Martin Pushkar. The discontent in Ivan's leadership turned into a series of civil wars within the Cossacks that Ivan eventually won, this breaking Ukrainian ties with Russia entirely. Ivan sought a renewed peace agreement with the Polish Commonwealth. It presented the lands of the Cossacks as the Grand Duchy of Ruthenia, a third and equal member alongside Poland and Lithuania. Cossacks would be able to independently self-govern their lands under the rule of the Polish king. This treaty, however, was never enforced, as the Cossacks immediately came under attack from Moscow. Russian-leaning Cossacks made things very difficult for Ivan, who, despite winning against Russia, still suffered continued risks of another insurrection to his position as hetman. Ivan abandoned his status in favour of a Polish statesman position. The Cossack Rada, or General Assembly, elected Bohdan Khmelnytsky's son, Yuri, now 18, as the new hetman. Yuri's role was difficult. He was first driven to sign a new alliance deal with Moscow that was increasingly detrimental to the freedoms and autonomy of the Cossacks. Yuri also had to deal with wars, not just with Poland, but also the Crimean Khanate. He was captured during a battle with Poland, eventually declared loyalty to the Polish king, and later granted nobility by the Parliament of the Polish Commonwealth. Russian-leaning Cossacks to the east could do nothing but declare Yuri's actions as treason, leading the young hetman to abandon his position and take up residence in a monastery. At the end of the wars between Russia and Poland, the two large nations agreed to separate the Cossack hetmanate in half, using the Dnipro River as a dividing line. Cossack lands were separated to the left bank, which is Ukraine's east of the Dnipro River, and the right bank, which is Ukraine's west of the Dnipro River. The eastern Cossacks were kept under the thumb of Moscow, and the western Cossacks under the thumb of Poland. Between 1672 and 1699, the right bank Cossacks sought freedom and liberty from their Polish masters and sought an alliance with the Crimean Khanate, controlled at that time by the Ottomans. The Ottomans anointed Petro Doroshenko as the Cossack hetman on the right bank of the Dnipro, and with the Khanate's help, the Cossacks pushed back Polish rule to the west. With the western borders of the Sich secured, the Ottoman-backed Cossacks crossed the Dnipro into the Russian-controlled left bank and sought to support the hetman there, Ivan Brukovetsky, in his ongoing rebellion against Moscow. Let's just say things got very complicated from there. Doroshenko became hetman over all Cossacks after killing Brukovetsky. Poland fought back the Cossacks in the west. This forced Doroshenko to once again abandon the left bank of the Cossacks to an acting hetman in his stead. This hetman then swore allegiance to Russia. Doroshenko sought an official military alliance with the Ottomans that many Cossacks disapproved of. They disapproved enough to elect another man, supported by the Crimean Khanate, named Sukovy, as his replacement. The Ottomans stepped in to force Crimea to remove their support from Sukovy. Sukovy named a replacement as hetman, Kornenko, and Doroshenko then defeated Kornenko in a battle. Doroshenko tried and failed to revive the treaty that would name Ruthenia as a member of the Polish Commonwealth. This was followed by Poland recognizing the authority of Kornenko as hetman, who once more attempted to attack the right bank of the Cossacks in order to unite Ukraine. Doroshenko followed this by aiding the Ottomans in an invasion of Poland, and after brutal fighting which laid waste to western Ukraine, Ukrainian lands were divvied out for the Cossacks under the rule of Doroshenko and his overlord, the Ottomans. Doroshenko increasingly relied on Ottoman might to remain in power, much to the anger of his previously loyal followers. Ukraine was staunchly Orthodox Christian, and the Ottomans were seen as hated infidels. Russian-leaning left-bank hetman Ivan Samoilovich, successor to Doroshenko's failed eastern replacement, was, by his people, proclaimed hetman of all Ukraine. Samoilovich launched an assault on the right bank of Ukraine, pushing Doroshenko to a siege. The Ottomans arrived to relieve that siege. Doroshenko, seeking to reunify the lands of Ukraine and end the constant wars, in the end declared loyalty to Russia. Russia demanded that Doroshenko also abdicate his rule as hetman of the right bank of Cossacks, and when he refused, was invaded by the left bank and 30,000 left bank Cossacks. Ukraine and the Cossacks were finally united under the rule of Ivan Samoilovich, closely lorded over by the Russian Empire. The history continues from there outside of our scope for the Cossacks, through Catherine the Great's enforced end of the Zaporozhian Sich and the persecution of Jewish Ukrainians, to Crimean Wars, to the complex political change brought about by the World Wars and Soviet control of Ukraine. In today's world, Ukraine is a self-governing and internationally recognized nation of over 40 million people. It encompasses both sides of the Dnipro River and the former lands of the Crimean Khanate. Millions of Ukrainians still recognize their cultural identity as going back to the Cossacks, and many still keep the traditions of the Cossacks alive in music, dress, and lifestyle. Let's remember those wayward bands of disjointed nomads who came together to seek liberty from great powers, to choose to live the way they wanted, to live without threat of lordship. A culture of warriors fighting to be treated fairly for their right to exist. What do you think? That was a rough video to be editing, by the way. Especially when it got to the bit about Petro Doroshenko and his goddamn traversing Europe like he's like Khaleesi on the back of a dragon, going from the wall to Storm's End in half a day. Hopefully you enjoyed that. What else have I got on the docket then? Yeah, so I've been given cheesy potato things, and they're all right. I don't think the cheese saved those potato things, but they're a bit more palatable for, I guess, a Western stomach. But there's also other food that we're going to be trying out eventually. I'm going to take a brief 5-minute break to refill my glass, and then we'll be coming back to look at some, I guess, arts and culture. So we've done some mythology, we've done some history, and we've got, say, 2 or 3 smaller videos about arts. So, you know, the things like the Pysanka eggs, Soviet artist, that kind of thing. So I'm going to take a break, and I will be back in a tick. We're back. Do you like my style? It's pretty good. I figured, considering I'm getting a lot of grief from a lot of angry Russians, I thought I'd lean into it a little bit and go the whole way. So is that big enough to put around my shoulders while we do the last bit? Struggling. So we're going the whole way. See that, haters? Let's go. Right then. So the final bit of this stream today. Final bit of the stream today is we're going to be doing some arts and culture. It's going to be a bit of a short one, this one. So once again, I'm going to pop straight into the GoFundMe. We are raising money for Ukraine. Here is the link. If you can, then you should. And if not, then don't. But this fundraiser will be up, well, for a while yet, so way past when we've finished streaming anyway. So, what have we got left to cover? So, we're a mythology and history channel on YouTube, right? We cover culture from a point of view of history and mythology. But there's also other culture. You know, you've got arts, you've got literature, you've got the arts. So you're talking theatre, movies. And it's worth showing that off a little bit as well. So we've got a couple of things to show. The first of which is, well, first of the three of these have all been scripted by Rue, by the way, is about the Pasanka eggs. So those really artistic eggs. So a bit of history about those. So let's go into... Oh, actually, before that, we're not going to have a chance to eat them on stream, but we now have... Let me go back to...
You're going to have to grab them.
We've got the cabbage things. I'm interested in seeing how these turn out. But what have they got in them, Claire?
The filling is pork, rice, carrots, tomato paste, and onions.
And it's wrapped in like a
Wrapped
cabbage.
in cabbage leaf.
What's the sauce?
And then the sauce is tomatoes, carrots, and sour cream.
Okay. Can you remember what it's called? That's the kicker.
Starts with the H.
Starts with a H.
Hobsinki.
Looks pretty good. It's going in the oven, yeah? How long does it take in the oven?
It says 2 to 3 hours, but I think if you're using raw meat, I've already pre-cooked the pork.
Right.
So I reckon, and everything's cooked, so it's just to heat it all through.
So you're talking like an hour and a half. I'm not even. It's weird that you put a cabbage in the oven for 3 hours.
You won't need to. I don't think you need to. I'll probably put it in for maybe half an hour if that.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But we'll not be able to eat that on stream. What I'll do is when we're nomming down on that, I'll have a little selfie video of us trying it out, and I'll put it on the Discord. So if you've got access to the Discord, you'll know, and if not, then I'm sure someone's gonna put a link in somewhere, or one of the bots is, and we'll do a little reaction video to that. Anyway, Pasanka eggs. We were doing Pasanka eggs, so let's move over to that.
Most of the world is familiar with the Fabergé egg and its uniqueness, but there exist many other similar concepts from neighboring regions. One of those is found in Ukraine. Known as the Pasanka egg, this decorated egg tradition dates back to ancient times and encompasses the culture of the region in more ways than one. It is a piece of Ukraine's history even before it was known as Ukraine, but it still represents the people's culture and talents. Some of the earliest Pysanka eggs were dated back to the 17th century. Though it is unfortunate, it is difficult and rare to find anything earlier than that due to their fragility. In recent times, these eggs have been crafted out of wood as well, which would undoubtedly increase their longevity. The designs placed upon these eggs are both delicate and intricate, and display a range of pastel and bright colors. Each overlay depicts different meaningful things to the Ukrainian people. While this is a short list, these are some of the most common depictions found: household items, tools, fauna, flora, pagan symbolism, Christian symbolism, and astrological icons such as the sun. The people.
Right, we're back. Told you they were short. We've only got a couple more of these left. So, next up, we are talking about more of the arts. And I'm going to skip this one because I was editing this one and I was editing the second one that I planned to have the second one, and it's actually quite a sad but beautiful story. And having just visited the Van Gogh Museum, you get a little bit closer to these kinds of minds, like of the artists. So I'm going to skip the next one. I'm going to move straight to the third one, and then we'll come back to the next one last, because I think that's a good one to end off on. So next up, we've got Lee Strasberg, and he's the father of method acting, and he's Ukrainian. So let's go into that.
The father of method acting, Lee Strasberg, was born in 1901, Budanov, Ukraine, originally a town in Poland, and from a young age found himself drawn to the world of acting. Around 1908, he and his family had moved to the United States, and when he was 15, he began acting for the first time. He would go on to take up proper acting lessons and advanced to the American Laboratory Theater, and then moved to study in Moscow under Konstantin Stanislavski. The education he gained from these times helped to shape his style of acting, which would come to be known as method acting later in his life. In 1931, he had worked with Harold Clurman and Cheryl Crawford to open the group theater, which would be pivotal in time. The theater hosted experimental and socially significant plays for the next 10 years. Around 1948, Lee would return back to New York and would join the Actors Studio. There, he would teach his acting style, method acting, which was heavily inspired from his time with Konstantin Stanislavski. This style is known as the technique wherein the actor works to become emotionally invested in the role that they are playing, usually going as far as to stay in character and attempting to empathize with the character's plights and emotional states.
Okay. So that's another famous dude. I really like these like short stories that Rue's done. I don't know if people kind of connect with that as much, but I really like the idea of these kind of people that do these amazing things that you never really tie back to Ukraine. Like, I never would have thought that the inventor of method acting was anything other than American, because, you know, America is where Hollywood is and all the actors flock to, and indeed so did Lee Strasberg, but he's from Ukraine, and that's worth celebrating, right? Finally, and this is the final thing we've got for the day, we've got a artist, an artist that was never really allowed to express himself. He lived in a time of Soviet governance, and he was a surrealist painter. But as you'll see shortly, that wasn't really allowed in Soviet times. So let's move over to the final thing we're going to be showing off, which is Ivan Marchuk.
Creator of the art technique known as Platonism, Ivan Marchuk ranks as a world-renowned artist that hails from a small town in Ternopil, Ukraine. From an early age, he was engaging with arts and crafts, as he was born to a family of weavers, but he pursued his education in painting during the 1950s. He would eventually join an underground art institute, hosted by Karl Zawierski, where there was exposure to works of art from around the world, including Ukrainian specifics. Ivan would remain here up until the end of the 1960s, when he would move to Kiev, and it was there that he would teach at the Institute of Super Hard Materials and the Kiev Combine of Monumental and Decorative Art. Due to heavy Soviet influence and holds over the arts in the region, Ivan tended to lead two lives, one following his work requirements to satiate those in charge, and one behind the scenes where he got to express himself and be who he really was. Ivan focused on surrealism and the abstract, which was frowned upon by the Soviet government, and it was for this reason that much of his work was suppressed during these times. The accepted arts of the Soviet era focused purely on social realism, which meant anything that was juxtaposed to that was to be ignored and kept from the public mind. With these frames of mind set forth, Ivan's works were banned for upwards of 17 years, and he hated it. With the fall of the USSR, his works would finally begin to shine as the ban was no longer in effect. Ivan would come to be renowned as one of the top 100 geniuses living in modern times. He also created the art technique of Platonism, which had its name based on the Ukrainian word for weaving or knitting, which was fitting as he came from a weaver's home in his youth.
Quite sad story that. As Rue just put in the chat there, it would be a really nice topic to go into. Spend more time on it. It's one of those stories of, like, you always hear those stories of artists that were ignored and then they discovered all of their artwork and it's like the greatest thing that's ever happened. I mean, you've obviously got Vincent van Gogh with his mental disabilities. I can't remember who was the artist who basically just lived in his attic and only came out once every week or so to get food. And then when he died, there was just hundreds and hundreds of paintings that were just worth a fortune now. But it's always like artists always slip by during their life and then they're celebrated afterwards. I'm just glad that people get to celebrate his artwork now, really. Yeah, that's about it. We are finished, I'm afraid. We're spent on Ukrainian articles for the day. Just take these headphones off. Oh, I'm a bit tangled. There we go. One last time, I'm going to go back to the GoFundMe and just say thank you to everyone who's donated. This is going to be up for a while. If you're watching this on, after the fact, if you're not watching this live, this is should still be available to you. Just donate what you can, and it's for a good cause. And I hope that today you've learned some new things, that you've, I guess, learned to celebrate Ukrainian culture a little bit. I hope you've been surprised. I hope that you've been a little bit invested in this and you've found something new to like about Ukraine. And I guess that you've learned that I guess Ukraine's worth saving. That there is a real reason why it's important to protect everyday Ukrainians, and all of the things we've shown are just part of that. you know, the mythical creatures of cultures in the countrysides, the long history from ancient times to the Cossacks to Soviet times to modern day, the art, the artists that were subjugated during Soviet times now let free to do what they can, and you know, famous actors, famous men that come from Ukraine. We heard earlier about like Vladimir Klitschko. He's a famous boxer, right? So Ukraine's worth saving, and Ukraine's currently at risk. Its culture's at risk, and the only thing I can say is Slava Ukraine, and hope you enjoyed the stream. Thank you very much, and I will catch you probably in a week or so when we release our long-awaited Dante's Purgatorio next episode. Cheers, Rue. Thanks for those of you that have been moderating. I'm sure I don't know how many people have been blocked away or anything, but it's been good. And there we go. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye.